He is from Gila River Indian Community. He is the managing director of the Native American Energy and Avant Energy organizations. Without further ado, Mr. John Lewis.
Good morning. Nice to see everybody here. I actually can't believe there's this many people in the room, so I was not planning to really do an extensive talk. But yeah, I'm happy to be here again. I've been invited to this conference before, I believe the first one, so it's good to see a lot of familiar faces in this room. I'm going to talk at a very high level about the energy transition and what that means to tribal communities, because I think that there's, in general, a lot of discussion about what that means at the macro level, at the national level. But I think it's a very different conversation of how that actually impacts tribes, tribal planning, tribal elected leadership have to take into different things into consideration. So all these kind of issues I'm hoping to cover at a very high level. I'm not going to get too much into the details regarding the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill, because I think that's been covered very well by all the different folks before me. So a little about myself. I am from the Gila River Indian Community, so I'm born and raised. I work for Avant Energy. So Avant Energy is in Minneapolis. We're an energy consulting firm. I am based in Phoenix, Arizona. So I've been with Avant for roughly 12 years. So it's been quite a while with Avant Energy. Again, they're a consulting firm. They're not a developer. They're not an EPC. They're not a technology provider. We provide neutral advice to tribes on energy planning issues. I also I have a number of roles. So one is the Green Hydrogen Coalition. So I'm the tribal lead for the Green Hydrogen Coalition. They're based in California, consulting firm called Stratagen. So I work directly with them on bringing tribes into the green hydrogen fold in terms of getting tribes in contact with different industry leaders, trying to do a lot of education and engagement with tribes. I think green hydrogen is an enormous opportunity for tribes. I also was just recently appointed to a Department of Energy board, the Energy Innovation Board. So that's actually in partnership with Sandia Labs, and I saw Sandra Begay Campbell. She is there. So the Energy Innovation Board, I believe it's called the Boost Program. We have not had our first meeting yet. It's the end of this month, so I'm very excited to be part of that. I believe the Energy Innovation Board's purpose is to help tribes, support tribes, work with tribes on economic development in communities where they're an energy community. So there might have been an abandoned mine or some type of power plant that is not there anymore. So bringing in economic engagement that has to do with energy projects, sustainable projects, renewable energy projects with tribal communities to create revenue and try to invigorate those communities. So I'm very pleased to be part of that. Their focus is on New Mexico, but I believe that the intent in the long term is to actually move into other states and other communities, not just New Mexico. Previously, for about 11 years, I was a council-appointed official for Gila River. If you don't know where Gila River is, we're very close to the city of Phoenix. We're actually one of the hosts for the Super Bowl this weekend. Go Eagles. They're staying at Gila River, so you might want to. The last 3 Super Bowls, whoever stayed at Gila River won the Super Bowl. So. Yeah, they did. So I was the chairman for our electric utility, Gila River Indian Community Utility Authority, for about 11 years. Council appointed, so that just means nobody else wanted to do it for 11 years. That's what I got to do. I also sat on our Gila River Telecom corporate board. So we were the GRTI, Gila River Telecom corporate board. We have about 12,000 people that live on reservation. So 7 different districts. So we provided broadband, wireless networks to our community. So a lot of fiber off reservation, a lot of fiber on reservation. So put that together. At least with my own community, I've been very involved in infrastructure. Energy planning, transmission, distribution. Gila River's electric utility is about 30 years old. The telecom corporation is about 30 years old. So we've been doing this for quite a while. I think we're pretty good at it. I tell tribes this all the time. If you want to look at some of the folks that are already doing it, look at Gila River. We're one of the best. Aha Makav Power Service, Fort Mojave Indian Tribe, they have the same deal. The vice chairman's in the back. Mr. Shan Lewis is back there. No relation. But they also are doing the same thing. They are serving their electricity and serving telecommunication services to their own people. And they've been doing it for just as long as we have. So there's a lot of folks, if you're looking at those types of enterprises or providing those type of services on your community, there's existing models out there. So you can go talk to those tribes. There's no secret sauce. It's not competitive. Reach out to them. You can contact me, whoever else, but you reach out and you ask those questions. Go take a visit. I highly recommend tribes to do those things because you can listen to consultants all day. You can listen to folks that maybe they just started working with tribes 5 years ago. I don't know. But if it was me, if it was my community that I was working for, trying to do the best, get the best information, I would go talk to the tribes doing it now. So I've been doing this for about 17 years total in working as a consultant, working in tribes and infrastructure. I'm going to start off, I'm very proud of where I'm from. So this is the Gila River Indian community about 150 years ago. That's the Gila River. Actually, I got a laser pointer. So this would be a typical house, a key is what we call it, a house. And this would be a typical family crossing the river. If you've ever been to Arizona, there's not an incredible amount of water, so there is no water in this river today. It was dammed up by the BIA, actually. But this would be a typical family crossing. This is typical, this would be a corral, a horse corral. This is very close to where the village I grew up, Sackatoon, Arizona, so this is very close to where I grew up. This is another type of key, just a very typical type of residential setting of what, was 150 plus years ago. This is a couple thousand years ago. So this is the Hohokam ruins, right off reservation, but this is just kind of stands testimony that we have been there for thousands of years. They cannot say otherwise. And this is now. So this is our governance center. This is the interior of our governance center. This is the outside. Actually, this is right up here. This is actually one of our museums that we've built. So the only reason I throw these things in here because I like to think that we've incorporated a lot of our culture and our beliefs and how we want to plan and how we want to be. We've been doing this for thousands of years, and I like to think we're still doing that now at Gila River. This is the utility authority building. It's a LEED certified building. Actually, we were trying to get silver, and I think we ended up with gold LEED certification. So this is a wholesale utility. We are purchasing wholesale electricity and selling it to our membership, which is, we serve about 5 of the 7 districts, which includes 3 of the 4 casinos. This would be a line crew. This is one of the substations that we've recently built, and there's line crews doing O&M, so we do the O&M to a system that we have partial ownership of through a 638 contract with BIA. But to get to this point, it took decades. This stuff does not happen overnight. There's a incredible amount of hard work. I like to think that whoever was on council in the early 80s or late 70s, they must have had such a vision. They must have had such a vision to get these things accomplished. This is a substation, one of the new substations we've built, actually, no, the second to last substation. But this is one of our basket dancing groups that we had a blessing to commission that substation. So everything we do, we like to incorporate our culture into that. On a side note, we built a substation after this, right before I left the utility in 2019. We energized that, and that was using the Hearth Act. So Gila River did go out and get a Hearth Act regulations in place. I will say that was incredibly helpful if you're a tribe, you're looking at planning, you're looking at regulatory hurdles to get around, you may want to have a HARTHAC regulations put in place, because you could expedite your approval process very, very quickly. And that's what we did. We had provisions in there for energy infrastructure, including solar development. Avant Energy, again, based in Minneapolis. We were working with tribes for, they were working with tribes before I got there, about 12 years ago. I think the best way to look at it is Avant wants to provide tribes with the best advice possible and make the best decisions possible. I think getting in front of elected leadership, getting in front of the key decision makers, that's all essential. You have to have everybody on board. You have to have community consensus for a lot of these things that actually go into operation or go into construction, for sure. But getting folks on board is takes a lot of time, as I'm sure everybody in this room knows. Councils change, so there is some continuity issues to be, to talk through. But I think in terms, somebody mentioned get an energy plan in place, I believe yesterday or the day before. I think that's very, very important. You have to have some kind of key document that's council approved to make sure everybody's on the same page. So we work with tribes. We've done a lot of utility formation projects. We've actually formed an active utility with the Pueblo of Acoma. I'll get to that in a second. A lot of solar evaluation, looking at microgrids, and just energy planning in general is what Avant is best at. These are kind of our engagements since 2012. I'm not sure how well you could read those, but there's a few all over the country. But I'd like to think that we have proven experience. If you're going to work with somebody, especially right now under these conditions, with all the money that's available, all the different tribal friendly provisions, you want to work with somebody who has experience. You want to work with somebody who's done this before. You don't want to work with a group that was just put together 2 years ago to take advantage of some of these things. You have to have that experience. You have to have that proven experience. I cannot understate that. Because what I saw in 2008, 2009, that was under the Obama American Recovery Act money. Tribes were not ready for that funding. They weren't. They had no planning in place. They had no idea of how to apply for some of these grants. And so I watched that as working with tribes and very, very new. I had no idea that, we would see that kind of federal funding again, which is now. But under the our recovery money, there was no timeline on that money, so that stuff's still flying around. Actually, I think I saw a contract in Wisconsin that was ARA funded last year or 2 years ago. So that had no timeline on it, but tribes, again, missed the boat. That can't happen now. I think there's enough folks, blowing the whistle, making tribes aware. Now is the time to go after this money. Now is the time to take advantage of the different provisions in the IRA. And also, the money has a time limit now, not like the ARA funding. So this is a good thing. These are some of the key engagements for Avant. Recently, we're still working with Agua Caliente Band of Kuya Indians in Palm Springs. Did a lot of working with SoCal Edison, one of the big investor-owned utilities in California. So dealing with them is very interesting. Pueblo of Acoma, they're in New Mexico, just west of Albuquerque. Very small pueblo. But they were able to form a utility in a very, very adversarial situation. They had an incumbent utility co-op that was not friendly to the tribe. And so Avant was able to work with the co-op, and they were able to purchase the distribution system, and they built a substation. They connected to P&M, the big IOU in New Mexico, and they were able to get wholesale power that way. I think if Acoma can do that, I think a lot of other tribes could do that. But again, it has to be very, you have to have some kind of end goal. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to build, energy facilities because you need to increase your reliability? Are you trying to take control of your wholesale power situation, power purchase situation? Like, you have to have energy goals. You have to have some kind of plan. And I think, again, it goes top down. The elected leadership really has to be on board with this stuff. Fond du Lac, we've worked with them. We've done a lot of studies for them. They have some solar up there in Forest County. We've done solar evaluation, microgrid, and utility studies for them. So I think in general right now, with Avant, I'm trying to make my rounds, talking to as many tribes as possible about the energy opportunities that are out there. I think evaluating your current infrastructure needs is key, because you can't focus on building new stuff when you have old stuff that needs fixing also. So many tribes have old infrastructure. Many tribes are at the end of a circuit. Many tribes don't have very reliable infrastructure. Some tribes don't have infrastructure at all. So in those situations, I think that you have to have more of a holistic approach. You have to have a more comprehensive plan. You really have to evaluate your infrastructure needs. This is not sexy stuff, you know. This is not gaming. This is not glitzy. This is not glamorous. Again, I've been doing this for 17 years, and this is not the kind of thing that gets the attention of tribal leadership. But it should, because this stuff's important. It's hard to serve your communities, hard to do things for your people, for your residences, for your tribal households, for your members, tribal households that are elder head of households with 20 people living in a home. You know, you have to take those things into consideration, because if you have reliable and affordable electricity, reliable and affordable energy, that increases your quality of life for your community. I think that's a baseline. You also have to, tribes also have to consider at the same time economic development. And again, you have to have reliable, affordable electricity to have economic development flourish in communities. So that's just two givens that need to be understood. Then I think in terms of just the federal funding opportunities, I'll get into that in a little bit, but that I think is very, very unique right now. And I have different thoughts on the grants that are becoming available through the infrastructure bill. I think with the ITC, or the investment tax credit through the IRA, I am much more excited about, to be honest with you. Energy transition, I'm not going to get too far into this, but what is this? It's basically, I think people have mentioned this the last few days, it just really is moving away from carbon, moving away from fossil fuels. I think what it has to do with also is bringing generation, renewable generation closer to load, closer to the end user, rather than having it, you know, hundreds of miles away on these very long transmission lines. I'm not going to get too much into that. What does it mean to tribal communities? Well, I think this is where the most interesting discussion could be had. I think many tribes have already been doing a lot of these things already. I think they have already planning around their environment. I think all those type of things tribes have been doing for thousands of years. I think it has to do with protecting your homelands. I think that you have to keep that in mind, that infrastructure is a part of that. You have to keep these things in mind. Tribal leaders have a lot on their plate. They have to think about, you know, land into trust and gaming and culture and language, and now they have to think about infrastructure. It's very difficult, but it is important, and it all is tied in. I think we have to have reliable infrastructure that works for us, and every community is different. I think communities in Wisconsin are different from communities in Alaska, and those are different from communities in Arizona or Southern California. All very different. So there is no cookie cutter way to do this, and any person that comes to your community and gives you a proposal that says, oh, we can do this, and they haven't done this, don't listen to them, because this is not cookie cutter stuff. You really have to, this is our very, very unique, very, very kind of case-by-case basis type of engagements, I think. Why are tribes so different in the energy transition? Because we have so much control, and we don't use it. Tribes have an enormous amount of control that municipalities and cities don't have. So states can set all these different renewable portfolio standards that are very, very aggressive. States can do that. Counties can do that. Cities can do that. Municipalities can do that. But how effective are those goals if they don't control their electricity, they don't control the land approvals, they don't control the water, they don't control the building codes, the regulatory stuff? don't control telecommunications. That helps smart grids. That helps microgrids. They don't control all those things. Tribes control each one of those things. So we're in a very unique class, and we need to recognize that now is the time to really look at this funding, look at these tribal provisions, because we could really create the communities that we want to have. I mean, we need to do that. I'm starting to see that with different communities. I'm starting to see that with different tribes. They're looking at trying to put all this stuff together. Google a few years ago, well, more than a few years ago, about 10 years ago, Google Fiber, they tried to deploy it in a few different cities. And they picked, I believe Salt Lake City was one, Kansas City was another one. The reason they picked those is because Kansas City and Salt Lake City, they have approval, they control their approval process, they control their water, they had a municipal power entity, municipal water entity, municipal telecommunications entity. What else do they have? One more. But the point is, they were able to work with those cities because they had an enormous amount of control. It made the approval faster for siting, for putting fiber in the ground, all those kind of things. That's because Kansas City and Salt Lake on paper would look like tribes in a way, in terms of governance, in terms of regulatory. So we have a lot of resources, and we have a lot of regulatory control over those resources. And I think, you know, coming from Arizona, we have 21 tribes, not including Navajo. I see this now. I see that the tribes are starting to recognize that. I see that tribes are starting to cooperate with each other. So I think cooperative effort also is part of this. I think there's tribes that are the same tribe, different reservations. There's cooperative efforts that also I think must be considered in this. In terms of internal capacity, I think this is something to talk about. You know, there's a lot to this, but I think the big one is tribal politics. Tribal politics does have, I think you have to take that into consideration when you're talking about the tribe's ability to carry out projects, big and small. You have to take these things into consideration. I think tribal leadership, you really have to look at how you're managing your enterprises. If there's enterprise, different economic development enterprise or gaming enterprise, all those things. There's tribes that have their council are the day-to-day decision makers, and some are not. Some are very executive kind of level where they are not the day-to-day operations kind of person. So I think when working with tribes, I think that's something I take into consideration. I think on the tribal side, you want to make it easy to have folks come in and work with you. So you have to take, tribal politics as a bad term to a lot of people, but it could be a good thing. I think there are good tribal leaders out there that are. They don't want to micromanage projects. I think that tribes are kind of, they're just like municipalities. Municipalities are slow. They're big and slow. But we should be small and nimble and working quicker and more efficient. That's the way I guess the point of that. I think resource availability, many tribes don't have the type of resources that other entities do. That needs to be recognized. I think right now, people mentioned this previously the day before, talking about grant writers, grant support staff. Now is the time to do that because of all this funding that's out there. You really have to kind of staff up right now. If you're not already doing it, like I'm looking for grant writers, and they're hard to find. Like I'm sure everybody else is looking for grant writers. They're incredibly hard to find those kind of support staff right now, but tribes need to do that. Community acceptance, I think that's part of this whole process. I think having your community on board, so if there is some conduit in terms of tribal governance for folks to the community to be heard. I've always found that's a very, very beneficial part of the process. I think when community is on board for whatever the project before it breaks ground, they want to have their comments heard. They want to have their thoughts heard, and tribal leadership needs to listen to that. There has to be some kind of conduit created for that. So consulting partners. So I think in terms of what this is, tribes are I feel like we're the worst at picking consulting partners because I think a true consultant's supposed to be neutral. I think that consulting has to be provided. It's not going to be free. Avant, I don't think that we've ever been told that we're cheap. We're probably more expensive than you would want to pay, but I also think that we have an incredible amount of experience. I think you get what you pay for. I think also you have to have the type of neutral advice where you're not working with a consultant who is also a technology provider. I think if the firm that you're talking to, as long as they're upfront and clear about that, I think that's fine. But there's many tribes I've worked with where they thought they were talking to a neutral party, and they were not. They were talking to somebody who represents an EPC, or somebody who represents a developer, or somebody who represents some kind of technology provider. So they actually had some skin in the game where, hey, you should buy these generators or these turbines because you need this, blah, 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 blah. I've seen that a lot with different tribes, trying to sell them product, trying to sell them hardware that they don't need. They're pushing product. They're not pushing neutral advice or neutral, consulting services. So very important to understand that. I also think that they should have, consultants should have technical expertise in this area. That should be a given. I worked with a lot of tribes. They've hired somebody for an energy project, and they have no background in energy. They've never worked on that. So you have to really look through the folks that you're hiring, that you're trying to bring on board to kind of make some of these things happen for your community. I think their experience has to be verifiable. Call people up. If they've worked with other tribes, call them up. It's really, really easy. But I work with many, many tribes where they've already onboarded somebody. They didn't check their background. They didn't call their references. So that's what you have to do. I mean, some of this, there is some due diligence here that it has to be done. Then you have to have well-defined roles and scopes of work. You can't give, tribes should not be giving out consulting contracts that are just carte blanche, do whatever you want. It has to be a very narrow, well-defined scope of work, because you want to make sure what you're paying for is what you will be getting. That's very important. Development partners, much different. Developers are not neutral. They are looking to secure sites. They're looking to secure project sites. They're looking for land control for their projects. Yes, they can bring some benefits, though. Project engineering and design, they could secure financing. They could secure power purchase agreements. But I think with partnerships with developers, they must be structured very, very carefully. There has to be a lot of consideration. You really have to have the right attorneys who understand tribal jurisdiction, tribal law. You have to have those folks, experts, on your side to work with these developers. There's many great developers out there. I engage with a lot of folks, different firms, different solar development firms over the years on utility scale projects. There are bad developers. It's really, I think there's personalities that come into play. I think that some of the, I think that some of the developers have corporate personalities that may not jibe well with a tribal, how the leadership, the personality of the leadership is. So those things have to be considered. It is really much of a matchmaking kind of situation. But at the end of the day, are you going to get what you want as a tribal community? Are they going to bring you, or can they bring and secure the end result that you are looking for? If you're looking for a large solar utility scale project, 50 megawatts or above, you're talking about, hundreds of acres you're going to be using. You won't be able to use that land for pretty much the next 30 years, and you're going to have to drive by or look at, your people are going to have to look at that infrastructure for the next 30 years. So you have to be really cognizant about that, and you have to understand, where is this energy going? Are we going to be using some of it on our community? Are we going to be using all of it on our community, or is it all going to be exported off? So those things have to be very clearly understood. Leadership has to understand it, has to be communicated to tribal members so they understand. Because if somebody's building a big, 50 megawatt solar project in my community at Gila River, everyone's going, oh, we're all going to get free energy now. No, we're actually not. You're going to pay for it, but that power is actually going somewhere else to an off-taker. So those kind of things need to be clearly understood and clearly discussed. Not going to get too much into the bipartisan infrastructure law. I'm just going to say it is pretty amazing, the funding that's coming out. I just think it's not, I'm not incredibly happy about some of the timing of some of these grants. I am not a grant writer. We do some grants at Avant. We work with tribes on grants, energy planning grants, deployment grants, all the different DOE and DOI grants, USDA grants. But I don't like them. I don't like writing them. Do I want to do that for a living? Heck no. But I will say that there's too much money out there for you not to look at it. I think the key is trying to put the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, ITC, together with these grants, together with Matt Ferguson back there at DOE LPO, his direct lending program. How do you put these together? How do you layer these together? I think that's the magic, that's the secret sauce, right? That's the magic right now. How are you going to do that? Who are you going to do that with? It's probably going to be multiple parties you're working with. I mean, there's accounting firms, there's consulting folks like Avant, there's developers that could bring enormous amount of capital to the table, enormous amount of proven professional experience. There's tax attorneys, there's just tribal law attorneys. You need to really put together that type of team to carry out many of these types of projects. I just think that the investment tax credit now with the tribal provisions, I think combining that with the direct loan program at LPO, I think that is an enormous amount of, it's very valuable right now. Again, I've been doing this for 17 years. I've never seen this type of tribal-friendly public law available to tribes. I've just never seen this before. So this is going to be an interesting next 3 to 5 years. How you put this stuff together, it's really going to be on the tribes. This is your responsibility. You have to go out and get the best folks to help you do this stuff. I just threw this in here. It has to do with solar projected investment under the Inflation Reduction Act. It's going to get bigger. And the only reason I throw that in there is because that means eventually technology equipment will get cheaper. It will. I don't know when that's going to happen. If anyone in this room has tried to buy a substation in the last 24 months, you can see the lead times are like 5 years. Looking at transformers, looking at every single part of a distribution system. Those things, the lead time is ridiculous right now. So doing the planning now is very valuable. Trying to figure out how to get this stuff paid for, using the IRA, using any grants available, using the direct lending program at DOE LPO. That gives you some time, but you have to start doing this stuff now. This is not gonna be around forever. Res on the Res, I put this website up a few years ago. I've let it languish, but I am going to reinvigorate it. I'm going to start updating it. I'm trying to put events up there. I'm trying to put news for tribes up there and things that I think are interesting. But yeah, I want to tie that in with what we're doing at Avant. Obviously, some of the things, other things we're doing in Indian country. I think with tribes, I think there's just a lot of maybe case studies that I'd like to throw up there and have people email me and questions and those kind of things. So I think there are some case studies out there to be looked at, to be talked about. Don't reinvent the wheel, because there's a lot of models out there with tribes. You just have to go look for them. This is my contact info. You can email me. I may or may not respond back. Everybody knows I'm terrible. Everybody in this room who knows me knows I'm terrible at responding to emails. But other than that, I'll take any questions if there are any. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
We got Vicky back here. Vicky has I know it's a great one.
I'm not so sure. John, thanks. That was a great deal of information and given us a lot to thought about. I want to go back to what you talked about relative to the Hearth Act. So the tribe I work for has Hearth Act responsibility. And the Hearth Act responsibility extends, of course, to leases. So when you said that you did the Hearth Act inclusion in your language, what does that actually look like? Because besides the Hearth Act, right, which only goes with leases, right, 30-year lease perhaps on trust property, but then the utility easements that are necessary to transfer that power, do you know how that was managed?
So with on the commercial leases, I mean, at least that was a lease with the utility authority. So Gila River Indian Community Utility Authority leased that from the tribe. So that's how that worked. Now, in terms of right-of-ways and easements, that's not part of the Hearth Act, right? Those aren't leases, although Pilar has, I think, a different version of that that she could talk about, because I've heard her talk about it. But yeah, that would be a different conversation. But I will say this, that the most tribes' Hearth Act regulations are on the DOI website. So you could search them, all the different provisions in the only thing that we did different was throwing consideration into the Hearth Act regarding solar leases with outside developers.
Right, so you overcame that barrier about having BIA approve the commercial lease, on trust land. The utility easements, at least in my experience, have been sometimes the holdup. How did you overcome that obstacle?
Oh, well, I mean, without, any outside entity that would have you're talking about the right-of-way easements?
No, the utility easement is very specific in the BIA language, right?
Yes,
Right
yes.
away is different because that's a categorical exclusion and
Yeah.
can be excluded, but the utility easement is a different kettle of fish. So you can tell I'm from the Midwest because I'm referring to fish. But but that's kind of the piece that I see as preventing, so you scale up, you get your thing, and then you get stuck because of the utility easements. And I think it's incumbent upon the tribe to work closely with the utility that comes on to say, okay, as you're going through this, as you want to distribute your power, you're going to have to get a utility easement, and you're going to have to work with the BIA, and that sometimes then requires a higher level of environmental review and public participation.
Well, I mean, so the advantage of having a Hearth Act would be you can have your own cultural resource managers provide that, and that would be the part that's expedited, right? So rather than have whatever BIA, local office, regional office, state office, however that is, rather than have them have a third party or have their environmental staff folks work with a third party to conduct those surveys and cultural resource assessments. And on their timeline, where let's say in Arizona, they are right now 24 to 36 months out on those type of things. We don't have to go through that at Gila River because we have a Hearth Act in place. So we use our own staff to do that, and that would be how we can expedite it. I think I didn't envision that. I thought it was more had to do with the actual term of the lease and how it could be approved and very quickly by BIA without BIA signature, all those different versions of that. But yeah, we didn't know that it would be this valuable, is what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you, Vicky.
Pilar's got a question.
Other question.
Oh, great. Here it comes.
I saw her first.
Hi, I'm actually from the Pueblo of Acoma, so I was just curious I'm curious on how your group, Avant Energy, kind of follows with the tribes once you're done kind of helping them with that utility establishment or whatever their needs are, right? I'm just curious how the follow-up is once you're done completing with whatever work or documentation you have to do, just because I know that Acoma Utility Authority, they did have a director for a while, and then they ended up leaving that position, and then another person filled that position. However, they ended up leaving it too. Just because I know this, just because I was trying to get in contact with them for some research. But I guess that's just I'm just curious on how your group kind of follows up with those transitions, just because I know that that's very important with making sure that all of what, they're working with you guys kind of remains throughout those different leadership changes.
Yes, so that's the challenge I talked about. I think having continuity in leadership, Acoma, as you know, how they elect their leadership is very different from other tribes. But nonetheless, we've been staying in close contact with the Pueblo. We don't, I think setting up, going through some type of utility formation, it's a lot of responsibility. And you have to. It could be a very expensive type of activity, a lot of costs associated, and you have to have one person who's going to coordinate those efforts, like a manager, a general manager, some type of utility person. I think the struggle with folks in New Mexico or rural country, well, tribes in general who are very rural, is staffing. Finding folks that can stay is difficult, and trying to attract folks to do these kind of jobs is very difficult. So that's always a hurdle with any tribe. Acoma in particular, yeah, they've had some turnover with their utility manager. I think we are on the fourth one. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we are still there providing technical assistance and helping them. Right now, they have a lot of internal operational kind of stuff, not so much planning. But yeah, they are looking for a director, I believe, right now. So.
Oh, and so y'all are still working with them currently?
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Back here.
Oh, here it comes.
Oh, Pilar.
I'm bracing myself.
You can run, John, but you can't hide. If you do need to get a hold of John, let me know. Just kidding. Let me just follow up with Vicky's question here, because I think, Gila River is a great example of a tribe that took advantage of the Hearth Act leasing regulations, but specifically with respect to utility right-of-ways or right-of-ways at large. There's two other options that you have. So one is you include that Gentile line in the lease. You don't do an easement. You include it as the lease. So if you have a Hearth Act regulations, and you do have to have the solar wind portion of the federal regulations in your Hearth Act regulations to be able to do solar and wind under the Hearth Act. So that's one important thing. So when John talked about adding the solar piece, there's a subpart F, I think it is. You have to include that in your leases. But then you include all the land of the project. You include in the lease itself. So you don't do easements at all. You just do the lease. So if the Gentile line is a corridor, it's a corridor in the lease. It's not an easement. So that's one way around it. The other way around it, and I haven't yet seen anybody do this, although I encourage for solar and wind a strong consideration, TERRAs. So the Tribal Energy Resource Agreement under the Energy Policy Act of 2005 explicitly allows you to do easements without BIA approval. So if your counterparty, your utility says, we don't want it in the lease, we want it in an easement, then the other way to do it is under a TERRA. And you've got to go to the BIA, get the TERRA approved. But if you keep it on solar and wind, they have a whole issues with downhole, because you can do downhole energy development, so don't do geothermal. But on the surface stuff, where it's just surface leasing, surface right-of-ways, the TERRA, somebody should just go get a TERRA, especially if you have a lot of land you're going to try and develop. And that's the other way around it. So either put it in the lease, and you don't do an easement, or go get a TERRA, which is comparable to the Hearth Act, and then you can do leases and easements under the TERRAs. So that's the answer to that question. And then the utility wants to complain, just tell them quit complaining. You can spend $1 million going to get your NEPA approval with the BIA if you want.
Any other questions back here? All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.